Hi, this is E.T. Somebody wrote and asked for a video relating to the history of chemistry in sports. We're talking about performance-enhancing drugs, in particular the anabolic kind. You know that these kinds of drugs are available and have been since the 1960s. Some of the more popular anabolic steroids are, well, of course, testosterone. Dianabol, that was probably the most popular for a long time. Winstrol, very popular among track and field athletes and boxers. Decadrobolin, a big favorite. Anavar, what else? Anadrol, and the list goes on and on. Although this seems relatively modern, in fact, the search for the masculine essence goes back to the ancient Greeks. They used to eat bull testicles prior to an athletic event, which they thought gave them extra energy, strength, and power, and probably did. Science got involved in the mid-19th century in Germany. The Germans are ahead of everybody at this time in chemistry. A German researcher named Berthold observed that the testicles of mammals secreted a substance into the blood that produced masculinizing effects. What it was, he didn't know. But a decade later, Charles Sicard captured that essence in a concentrated extract that he got from guinea pigs and dogs. He said, if this is injected into another mammal, it will increase the physical strength and alertness and general intellectual ability. Well, this was actually done in 1889 when that extract was given to a baseball player, Pud Galvin. He was a Hall of Famer and is assumed to be the first athlete ever injected with a steroid-based product. But keep in mind, this extract is extremely expensive. A lot of animals have to die to provide it. So the search is going to be some way to narrow it down to just that something that's in the serum and then synthesize it. In Germany and here in the United States, there was a lot of research being done to do just that. In 1927, at the University of Chicago, chemists experimented with it, and they narrowed that substance down that we know as testosterone. In the 1930s, there were three chemistry firms that were really putting big money into this. One was Organon, I think they're in the Netherlands. There was Ciba, a Swiss company, and Schering. I believe they were in Germany. They're trying to isolate and synthesize this substance that you and I know today as testosterone. Organon was the first to isolate and identify the chemical structure of testosterone. Well, there's no way you can make it affordable unless you can synthesize it. Some other research of this nature was done by Ciba, and in 1939, this was considered so important that the chemist involved received the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. In the 1940s, a researcher and adventurer by the name of Russell Marker from Pennsylvania State College recognized the steroid raw material could be synthesized from a plant steroid. It was called diosgenin, Diosgenin. In 1942, Marker was in the Mexican jungles looking for wild yams that he knew were rich in diosgenin, and finally found some, and thus is born the steroid industry in Mexico. In 1944, he founded in Mexico the Syntex Company, Syntex. and Syntex will for a while produce the bulk of steroids sold in the U.S. About this time, a writer, I think it was Paul DeCroof, wrote a book, The Male Hormone. It popularized testosterone. We don't know how many people around the United States actually read it. What we do know is this, that in 1958, in a few isolated circles involving bodybuilders, a few people will be experimenting. And by 1965, we'll have Larry Scott, the first IFBB Mr. Olympia, admit openly that he and most of the other top bodybuilders were using steroids by, 1960 or 1961. Well, as a result of the new synthetic testosterone, we have other companies trying to make their own variations of it. SD Searle Pharmaceuticals were able to synthesize Nilivar, okayed by the FDA in 1956, and it would be taken by Bill Pearl, a Mr. Universe, in 1958. He was on a 12-week cycle, taking 30 milligrams a day. In 1958, SIBA introduced Dianabol. Remember, that's the first to really go mainstream. But it would not be available until about 1960. And it was popularized by a Dr. John Ziegler, team doctor for the York Barbell Club, which was coached, I use that word in air quotes, by Bob Hoffman of York, Pennsylvania. In 1954, Ziegler had it confirmed that the Soviet lifters were using some kind of anabolic substance. Well, Ziegler was working part-time at SIBA Pharmaceuticals. They had a lab in New Jersey. They provided him testosterone propionate for, as they put it, research, which in 1954 he did give to a few of the York lifters. But that was pretty much the end of that. In 1955, Dianabol was developed by SIBA in Switzerland, but it would not be until 1960 that Ziegler would get his hands on it, and he would be giving about 10 milligrams of Dianabol per day to the United States weightlifting team. They were preparing for the 1960 Olympics. So you can see from what we've talked about so far that it's highly unlikely that in the 1950s, at least until 58, 59, that anybody in middle America, outside of somebody like Bill Pearl, is going to be using this stuff. Probably they don't even know it exists. But by 1968, at the Mexico City Olympics, it was found out that a sizable number, if not the overwhelming majority, of the athletes were using some sort of anabolic steroid. Track and Field News in 1969 referred to the drugs as the breakfast of champions. So ET continues to believe that the overwhelming majority of athletes and bodybuilders did not use anabolics during the 1950s. And certainly they did not use it decades prior to that. Well, that's what I think. What do you think? Put your comments below. You see that subscribe bar? Hit it. Give this video a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Thanks.